I'm Joshua, and I'm an INTP. And first and foremost, I would like to say thank you for viewing this video. The topic of this video will be on the difference between ENTPs and INTPs. Now, there are a number of videos that have been made on helping these two sister types differentiate themselves from one another. And there are insightful things that have already been said on this topic. However, one thing that I would like to add to this topic, and a bit of nuance and insight, is that what differs between an ENTP and an INTP is their attitude towards their models. And this is best understood by viewing not necessarily it has much to do with the order of being a dominant introverted thinker versus being a dominant extroverted intuitive type. But it's to say this, that NE and TI play a prominent role in both the ENTP and INTP psyche. And an ENTP and an INTP are both going to identify on a general level with being very logically driven and hyper-exploratory in their nature and in their bent with concepts and ideas, and both favoring revising concepts and ideas. However, there is something that in the NESI axis does with the TEFI axis, and that is the creation of models or explanatory frameworks for the nature of reality. ENTPs and INTPs both create abstract frameworks to explain the nature of reality and the emergence of phenomenon that they observe in their local environment and the global universal environment that they find themselves in. And it's to say that the models are a representation of explanatory mechanisms. So a model is just as it sounds in being a mock or a simplified representation, not simplified insofar as they're simplified in terms of the ENTP and the INTP are not concerned with accuracy, but simplification insofar as that it is easier to manipulate and maneuver the abstraction that it is to manipulate the gross reality in all of its contextuality and details. And also the model serves as the standpoint to be multifaceted in analyses. So the ENTP and the INTP are both going to create thinking tools, essentially, and are both going to create systematic structures of understanding. It's hard to say because it's been postulated that codification, or the tendency to codify things, is something that's more indicative of INTPs, but ENTPs who have strong introverted thinking are just as adept to codification, as can be noted in the quantum mechanical framework and thinking of the prominent physicist Richard Feynman, who is most likely an ENTP. ENTPs are said not to like to write down their ideas or record them, but I, as an INTP, don't necessarily like to write everything down and record it, because there is a great deal of rumination going on and deliberation going on before I'm really to record something, because I'm not finished thinking with it. My brain works more like a cow's stomach insofar as that it has somewhat of an 8-compartmentalized system, and it chews on the conceptual and intellectual cud for a while and digests it until it comes to an conclusion. And I know many ENTPs can relate to that thought. However, there is a difference in how ENTPs and INTPs, there's a difference in their attitude towards the models that they construct. In INTP, when we create models, we are not as flighty. We like, and I say flighty insofar as we like to look at a multitude of details and bits of information and cross-contextual referential standpoints, but we do that for the purpose of perfecting the model. And INTPs seek out ideas and concepts and create ideas and concepts that have promise to them, and we like promise. We like the solidification and the closure in a system. I do not come to conclusions very often, and it takes me a long time to come to an conclusion, but if I come to a conclusion, I want it to be done, and I want that to be the last time I address the issue. And it's my attitude towards models, because I prize the models that I make. The models that I make are going to stand as the basis for me fundamentally understanding reality, and they're going to be the things that I present to the world in order to increase, challenge, and help develop their understanding about the fundamental nature of reality. And the ENTP is concerned with the fundamental nature of reality, but their open-ended nature causes them not to be very fond of any one model over the other. It is always an open-ended game with them, per se, insofar as that they don't really care about the models. They create models and they use models, but they don't care about the models. I don't care about the models insofar as I'll be violent with my models and create several prototypes and throw them up against something and watch them be smashed. But it's essentially because I'm trying to pull out what's good, the good elements in a thing, and what makes something have soundness and validity to it, holding on to that, discarding what doesn't, so that I can continue to construct and make this model the most robust and retardant thing to criticism and scrutiny. And I want to see that it can predict and be as accurate to the greatest decimal place it can be in describing physical phenomenon or things that take place in reality within an individual psyche or within the world. I want to be accurate, I want to be right, and I want to be accurate and right more than anything else. That is the chief concern in what I'm creating. I don't ever think necessarily that I'm always right, but that is my goal, because I'm trying to answer the question for all time. And so it takes me a long time because I don't want to do it again. I don't want to do this again. I want to be as efficient as I can be in the construction of the model, and even if that means destroying multiple models and aggregating the parts of their wreckage to have something much more grand and pristine that seems to have promise to it, I will do that. The ENTP, however, is more anarchical in their nature insofar as that they do have internal structures, but they have 1,000 different models going in their head, and because of extroverted intuition's bent to functionality essentially and what a thing can do, they are much more flippant in their use of models and their care and concern for them. They're not like me insofar as that some days it makes sense to think this, some days who cares, let's see what happens. And there's never a day where I'm like, who cares, let's see what happens with the truth. I'm not like that. That's why I'm an INTP, not an ENTP. I spend my hours on my models, and I spend my hours using extroverted intuition to test them to see how good they are. ENTPs spend their hours testing reality and testing it, and then coming up with models to test it some more. They never want to essentially answer the question. They will gladly answer the question if there's some gain from doing so and a greater promise in novelty, but it's the greater bent for novelty and seeking of it that lends them to this open-ended nature and not being very discerning with their models. And what I mean is this: an ENTP will accept a multitude of explanations for one thing and will continue to consider all the differing explanations for one thing. I will consider a multitude of explanations for one thing, but over time I will eliminate each of these models of explanations for that one thing. It will never ever stay a multitude of explanations. I may start with 1,000 explanations for one thing, but over a process of 5 to 10 years, I'm going to get down to 2, and I'm then going to look between the 2 and do the dialectical reasoning that Hegel promotes, and go from thesis and antithesis to synthesis. Typically, I'm going to break both those models apart and put them back together in some new, grander schema. That's one way I do with the models. Or I throw both of them away and make my own. Usually I put 2 models together, and it's not that simple, but that's the best illustration I can give, because most of the models I come up with, they're just an amalgamation of quite a few different pieces of things that I felt were incomplete but could be made whole by this logical innovation on my part, or this empirical data over here, or this thing over there. I am a mechanic and a architect and a builder in terms of knowledge structures. It's why I've said that I'm an epistemologist in other videos. ENTPs are epistemologists insofar as that they like to inspect knowledge structures, and their motivation for inspecting knowledge structures is fun, and it's really fun and fulfilling their need for novelty. But my motivation for inspecting knowledge structures is to seeing which ones have the greatest amount of promise, or which ones have the raw conceptual ore that I can use to build the grandest structure that I can build, insofar as of its grandness being the one with the greatest amount of depth and scope in its explanatory power. It's really explanatory power, or the ability to render something accurately that I'm after, and the ENTP is not necessarily after that. They like it, but they're not after that. They're after the game of seeing how much honest but troublesome fun I can stir up insofar as poking, questioning, and prodding things and seeing what comes out of them. They're very much attuned to the epistemological structures that are in the world and very much inspect them like I do, and we both have a seed of doubt and skepticism towards us. It's just the seed of doubt and skepticism that lives in us are towards 2 different aims, and it's really our discrepancy with the models. I have a very good ENTP friend who is a girl, and she loves everything from science to mysticism. And I don't go down the mysticism camp, but for her, it's an open-ended exploration, and all of the things exist at one time in her mind. And she is completely okay with the contradictory nature of those things existing simultaneously within her mind. And I'm okay with it to a point. I know that the simultaneity of the existence of contradictory elements is important in coming up with creative breakthroughs. Not by way of learning that, but just because since I've been a kid, that's essentially what I do. I know damn well there's more than one way to explain something, and there's more than two faces. There's two faces to the side of the coin. But, I mean, I'm after the truth. So I have the 1, 0, or null category. The 1 being true, the 0 being false, and the null being indeterminate. I can't determine if it's true or false yet, so it just goes in the null category, and eventually it's going to come back to be analyzed and see if it can get back into the binary system. But the multitude of contradictions existing in my mind are there to be eliminated at some point to get to a 1 or a 0. I start with a lot, but then I winnow it down to a few things with promise, or to a multitude of raw conceptual material, which is what happens oftentimes in my creation of knowledge structures. Just, I break everything down to raw conceptual materials, and then I start to build with what I have an axiomatic pinning of empirical validation, because I'm a physics major and I've somewhat been inundated by the scientific method. I have these logical axiomatic structures in these raw conceptual philosophical ore that I'm going to wed together with empiricism and logical ingenuity and create these models and these schemas. And that's what I do, and the ENTP does not do that. They take and break things apart to see what they're made of, and then put them back together again, put them on a shelf, grab another thing, break it apart, see what it's made of, put it back together again, put it on a shelf, get another thing, and then go back to the other thing it had before, and then go back to the other thing it had before, and continue to do this reiterative loop, because it's just they're just trying to see and drink in all the possibilities. It's why a ENTP can seem indiscriminatory to me, per se, sometimes, particularly like my friend, because I will think, well, how is it that you can hold evolution and mysticism at the same time in your mind? They're fundamentally contradictory. I, on the other hand, just take what's important I ask what has the best explanatory power in the terms of the physical and material world, what's important about mysticism, what concepts does it hold, break them both down and synthesize something new, because they're never going to talk to each other in the way that they fundamentally exist now. But neither of them are going to stay the same after I'm done with them, and but they're not. I'm not going to hold them both. I just think that, like, why would you do that? You're not going to get to a conclusion. Like, and that's what I as an INTP want to get to, is some conclusion about a thing. And it's not to say that ENTPs don't come to conclusions about things. It's just that really it's the models. What we do with the models that we make, and why we make the models in the first place, and the attitudes we have towards models. ENTPs do not like models as much as INTPs like models. And what I mean is, it's not like the ENTP isn't proud of their thoughts or the logical, innovative breakthroughs that they come up with, or the systematic structures that they build. They are proud of it as the fact that they are NTs and they draw their esteem from their logical ingenuity, but they are much more interested in playing with those things, per se, for their own fancy and novel drinking of the drinking of possibilities and novelty, to where I'm making those models to do something, or to be presented, or to predict something. I want them to say something. It does not make any sense for me. I'm not going to waste all that effort. I spend 90% of my time thinking about a problem before I ever come up with a answer for it. And that's something that Einstein said, but it's something I notice about my thoughts. It's like I have 8 stomachs and I'm chewing cud for a very long time, and I seem slow. I seem so very slow to a lot of people, insofar as how long it takes me to come to a conclusion about something. But when I finally do come to the conclusion, or I finally do build the thing, it's so damn spot on that it's like you're going to look pretty foolish for denying it when it finally comes out, and it will if I spent the right amount of time, which I try to. So I'm always reticent to release a video, or reticent to release a paper. I still have papers in my Google Drive that have been there for 10 years that I just haven't submitted because I'm just not going to do it yet. I don't think they're ready. I don't know. I gotta investigate more. That's how I am. So, but when they're out there, when they're finally done, when it's finally over, it will predict, or will represent something to a fine amount of decimal places, and I can only think about it like that because, I mean, I deal with statistics every day in an experimental setting, and numbers and quantitative analysis in experimental setting, so it's the only analogy I can really come up with insofar as what it is I'm trying to do. But the ENTP, if they get the decimal place accuracy to 3, at least to the thousandths place being 3 spaces away, they're good with that because that's interesting. If they get to be 16 spaces, I want like 24. Like, I want it to be so long that we're like, okay, that's good enough, we're done. But if they get it to 3 places, they get it to 16 places, hey, that's interesting, and that means there's more to see. And we're going to see if we can get it to 100 places. It may not even be reasonable. You may not even be able to reasonably get it to 100 decimal places. But the ENTP doesn't necessarily care because they are much more concerned with exploring the model and playing with the things and breaking them apart and doing that reiterative process more so than I am as an INTP, and it's utterly exhausting to me. I don't know how my friend has the energy she has to. I mean, I never get tired of intellectual inquiry, but it's inquiry with a point. And a lot of times ENTPs don't really have a point because they're indiscriminatory towards the models. They're not trying to come up with the ultimate explanation or answer for things, which an INTP is always trying to come up with the best answer possible. They're not doing that per se, but it doesn't mean they won't come up with some really magnificent and grand answers, and answers that will really alter our fundamental understanding of reality, as Richard Feynman did in his time in physics and quantum mechanics. But fundamentally, that's what I see in the difference between an ENTP and an INTP, because what we do as types are so similar and analogous that we can be considered as the same type in many ways, but fundamentally we differ in our attitudes towards models and what we want from models and what we do with models, and how we're motivated as epistemologists in terms of dealing with knowledge structures. So those are my thoughts on the differences between ENTPs and INTPs, and hopefully you found that. If you don't, at least hopefully you found it interesting. Thank you for watching.